Okay. As promised, what I'm going to do for this short video is just kind of walk you through. I've chosen two student sample papers, one from last semester and the last year as well. Just in talking to some of you guys this week during our conferences, some of you had a pretty good idea of, what it should look like and how everything comes together. But a few of you we're kind of struggling with paragraph to paragraph in the kind of overall picture. So as promised, what I'm going to do is, and this is what I would be doing in class version of, is just kind of walk you through these two sample papers. I've kind of annotated them. I'll be posting them alongside the video on Canvas under the week 10 module as well. So you can kind of have them for reference, just not in the video here. So this first one, and both of them are on articles that you guys aren't working with, so don't worry so much about kind of the content and understanding that, but think more about the structure, all the kind of components that you need to have in your draft as you work to revise it by Sunday. Okay, so just kind of starting off, just quick thing about kind of, most of you did this in your drafts, I think, but just, you have the appropriate header, page numbers. Some of you had questions about title. I'm not too picky, honestly, like this student, she created her own title. This one's about immigrants, but that's not the title of the article itself, but obviously she's playing on the idea of the wall and stuff. So this other one took the more traditional approach and just said analysis of and gave the original title. Okay, so it's up to you. You can be snazzy with it if you want to, or you can just analysis of X, and that's more than fine, but do have a title for it and make sure that it's formatted if you haven't already done so. Okay, so for this first one, again, I talked to some of you guys. Some of you jumped straight into the article and started talking about rhetorical strategies already. So do take the time. It might just be kind of 2 or 3 sentences like this student has here, but just establishing the wider context, like what debate, what topic, controversy, whatever it is, what is going on at the center of this article that made this person write and try and persuade you of something, right? So before you get into your work as a writer for this particular paper, think about what the wider context is. Remember that we kind of always talked about that kind of, you started with a wider context before zooming down and focusing on, whatever your purpose is for the article, okay? So it need not be very long. I think, for example, this one, maybe she spent a bit more time, not actually that much, but so do have that. That's what I'm looking for in terms of kind of how you set it up. Transition into the article. Do give the full title. Identify who the author is. You don't have to go into a big bio like this person doesn't, and I think the other example too doesn't. So thesis statement. I think I talked to everybody in conferences about thesis statement, because that's one of the big things I'm looking for. Not that kind of roadmap that clearly tells me these are the exact elements I'm going to be talking about, for the rest of the paper. I'm going to be lost. Like some of you mentioned more than was actually in the paragraph, so that you realized, you kind of set it up and said, okay, I'm going to talk about these things, and maybe 1 or 2 of them dropped out, which is perfectly fine. But just make sure that that thesis matches up exactly. Like this girl is talking about, well, this is about immigration and the repeal of DACA. So she's talking about kind of, she provides the case history or the case story of DACA, parallelism, and juxtaposition. So those are the 3 things. And you can kind of see in the paper here, so element 1, element 2, and she actually spends more time on parallelism here, okay? So she has 2 paragraphs devoted to it. So for you guys, if you have one that kind of occupies more space, or you have plenty of examples, then feel free to do that, right? So it doesn't have to be 2 paragraphs, but if you have enough and you're worried about kind of having a super long paragraph, just break it up into 2. That's cool. And then she has a 3rd element down here. Okay. So, okay. This paper, I talked to some of you guys about having a summary. You don't always need one, but sometimes it's just easier to do it that way. You can kind of blend in information as you go. I think I talked about this in class before spring break, but again, that seems so long ago. So I need to know something. Pretend like you're writing for someone that has never seen this article before, never read this article. So when you start talking about bits and pieces of it in your analysis, and you haven't kind of established what those are, we're not going to get them as a reader, right? So make sure that you kind of either summarize as you go, as needed, or just have like block it off and have a summary paragraph here. Like this girl did it, and it's not that long, right? So she talks about, what he does, and he draws a connection between this, and with that connection, he then moves and does this. Ends the article, by noting that, so kind of come back to the main idea in that case. Okay, so do have a summary paragraph, especially for those of you that are really struggling or feel that you're struggling with word count. It really helps too, and preferably it should fall in there if you are going to have one after the introduction. Okay. Element 1, so she's talking about DACA here, and I've kind of color-coded it. Always have a topic sentence, announces what the focus is. I'm going to talk about DACA and what is achieved by doing this, by using this strategy or having this element, right? So to prove his point about immigrants being valued. So, and I think most of the drafts that I read, you guys were pretty good about having that topic sentence, identifying what the element is and giving some indication of what the purpose or the effect or the impact of it is, right? Or motivation, whatever you want to call it. Have evidence. So the blue parts are here, all the evidence directly from the text. Please don't paraphrase the whole way through, right? I know even if you're worried about kind of percentages, don't worry about it. I think this writer does a good job of kind of blending in, so just like picking out discharged or high school diploma and those kind of things, not big lump quotations, but do directly cite from the text. So don't try and paraphrase everything. So the blue part is the kind of evidence citation from the text, and then always kind of follow through with the analytical part, like by doing this, and I think I put the format here, by doing X, the author is able to achieve or do this other thing, right? So make sure that you have that close connection between the evidence of the text and what work is being performed by that strategy, or kind of whatever is going on in the text, okay? This is essentially your analytical part where you're breaking down the text, okay? And again, if you want to kind of view this on Canvas later, you can. I'll keep the color coding on it, but you can kind of see the format. So, third element, good concluding sentences, kind of tying up, kind of the body paragraphs before moving on to the next element. Before looking at the second paper, I just wanted to take a moment about conclusions, because some of you were kind of a bit wishy-washy, not sure what to do with a conclusion. So I'm not looking for you to kind of solve all the world's problems with your conclusion, but it needs to kind of have certain elements, or it should have. So for example, here, return to the kind of effectiveness of the argument, kind of restate the argument, whether it's effective or not. Recap your points. So if you talk about ethos, pathos, and logos, you talk about repetition, you talk about word choice, whatever it is, have kind of roughly a sentence for each of those, kind of returning for the purpose of those and what was achieved. This one, and again, I think the last few sentences here, just looks at the wider context. So talking about immigration. So here she starts kind of, while advocates might not like the idea of an argument that defends an immigrant's right to stay, Gesson effectively makes his claim about an immigrant's humanity over their talents. This is crucial because if immigrants were judged on the basis of their contribution to society, people will fail to realize what immigrants really are, humans. So she kind of mentions the fact that people might disagree with this or oppose this idea, but also kind of the consequences, the so what factor that I think we talked about kind of with the report maybe. for conclusions. So kind of think about kind of the wider significance. It could be consequences. If we don't act on this, what could happen? And again, it need not be very long, but just maybe kind of 1-2 sentences, opening it back up to the significance or value. What contribution is being made here? So that's essentially the 3 things that I'm looking for in terms of a conclusion. So if you are kind of lost about a conclusion and you just don't want to restate your thesis, have a look at this example, this first example here, because I think she does a pretty good job, and it's not overly lengthy as well. Okay, so before I close up, this is another example. I think this is a slightly more kind of complex example. But it follows the same format, kind of marked the same things here, right? So this one's about consent and kind of situating it within the context of the Me Too movement. Her thesis here, it's one of those mixed theses. Like, it's good, it does these things very effectively, but there's one element that's problematic. So I think a couple of you, or maybe a handful of you, had these kind of mixed thesis statements. So this might be handy to look at if you're kind of in that category. As you notice here, she doesn't have a summary paragraph because I think she does a good job of explaining as she goes. Like, she's talking about sexual assault here, and she goes kind of fills in what she needs to before moving on to her element here. Okay, so keep that in mind. You don't have to have a blocked off summary paragraph like the one before. You're more than welcome to kind of summarize as you go, like I said. But keep in mind that if you do it this way, you just kind of, you have more moving parts to keep aware of. So it's a little bit more difficult of a path, I'd say, but not bad. As you can see, we have evidence directly, like she kind of does the longer quotes here, but you know, as long as you pull through with your analysis right afterwards, you're more than fine, okay? So by virtue of this quote, she creates an atmosphere that allows the audience to better understand what she felt in that situation and allows them to sympathize with the young woman. So regardless, if you haven't read the article, you can still see how she's breaking it down and talking about the effect of this appeal here. Okay. Second element, same format. I'm not going to kind of spend too much time on it because if you want to go back through, these will, both copies of these will be available on Canvas, but you can see kind of you have that tight relationship between evidence from the text and then how you break it down and the language by which you break it down. Okay. Element 3, this one's talking about language choices, so this might be interesting for you guys that are talking about language, and you know how, like, she's talking about languages clearly placing men in the position of blame. Statements such as blah 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 really emphasize this sort of language, and this is the analytical part. This sort of language can come across as accusatory and generalizing men based only on one she's spoken to. So talking about, again, the effect of these statements of that language. Okay. I'll just finish up here quickly with the conclusion. So this one's a little bit shorter, but I think it still gets the job done. Maybe not as it's maybe not as good as the one we just looked at in that sense, but this writer makes a compelling argument. So again, returning to the effectiveness from your thesis statement. The elements here, she kind of walks you through, kind of recaps those. And just at the very end, I mean, this is very brief, but even so, this article provided a very well-articulated dissection of an issue many of us wish to see resolved. So again, kind of a very brief, but making that kind of step to a wider context. I think she could have done much more with this conclusion personally, but overall, both of these are good examples, A papers for assignment like this. So if you are stuck with structure, or how everything is supposed to come together in the end, and kind of you're stuck in the wheels of revision at this point and pulling everything together, do have a look through these, and I hope this was helpful for you. If you have any questions, you know where to find me.